Hey everyone, back with my report from the Future of Video conference in Marina del Rey, California. And I must start by saying that the Future of Video looks incredible. Saw some really mind-blowing and really innovative approaches and technologies that are being developed to really continue the growth of streaming and OTT and addressable video in general. Exciting conference. I'm really glad that I was here and look forward to bringing some of these solutions forward to our clients.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our Future of Video series and thank you for joining us today for our sessions on advertising and live content. My name is Sarah Lee, I am a research analyst here at Parks Associates and I am so pleased to be kicking off the discussion today. Before we get going, I want to thank our sponsors for making Future of Video possible, so thank you to Audia and FPT Software. We will again host our in-person Future of Video event in Los Angeles, California, later in 2023. So please consider sponsoring that event now to get the annual visibility that comes along with it. Please contact Ashton Gambrell on our team who can help you with any questions that you may have regarding that sponsorship. We have an awesome lineup of speakers today and some great research data to set the stage for our panel discussion with Whirl, Aceto, Iris TV, and Origin Media, as well as a visionary spotlight talk from Tony Marlowe, Chief Marketing Officer of LG Ad Solutions. If you're not familiar with Parks Associates, we have been studying the services and technologies that consumers use in their home and in their lives for 37 years, including the broadband, smart home, and entertainment markets. Some of the research you'll see today pulls from our primary research of tens of thousands of households that we survey across the year about their use of entertainment services, perspectives on the advertising, and preferences for new entertainment models. We also produce many syndicated reports throughout the year and do a lot of custom work to help companies have the best data to support business decisions. The video entertainment market in particular is so complex and now very fragmented. Our research solutions and tools are built to provide the best understanding of the details of broadband and streaming services. And we do this through the OTT Video Market Tracker, our Consumer Insights dashboards, our quantified consumer studies, and the ability to customize our data set for our clients' needs. One of the syndicated reports we recently published covers the rapid expansion of ad-based OTT streaming services and helps our subscribers understand the difference between FAST and AVOD models as they're structured today, as well as our analysts' view of how new ad-based tiers from subscription services will impact the market. We also profile more than 400 OTT services in North America in our OTT Market Tracker, which features a monthly analysis of current market players, new entrants, and trends in content, consumer usage and distribution, as well as subscriber numbers for more than 100 OTT services that are updated on a quarterly basis. Please let us know right now in the comments box if your company currently uses our research to help. If you aren't sure, put that too, and we can touch base and let you know. We want to make sure that you are connected to the reading room or have a login to access information your company might already be buying. Now let's move into today's topic, advertising and live content. There are three critical trends really shaping the market for video services this year, with advertising and live content at their core, including a new focus across the media ecosystem, and particularly investors on profitability, the rise of ad-based services, and the continued demand for live content, including high-dollar rights coming to streaming services. So let's start with the focus on profitability. We are now out of the development phase and into the next generation of streaming. The development phase consisted of a paid subscription model with the purpose of migrating traditional pay TV customers to streaming and a focus on building subscriber bases through exclusives and original content. But there are major costs involved in producing original content, and the market has clearly shifted to needing to see a return on investment in streaming. This next generation of streaming involves leveraging new opportunities, figuring out how to reach consumers and what content is most in demand, placing more emphasis on ad models, and identifying what new formats for video and advertising need to be used to continue to advance the market. This new focus on profitability has shifted the business metrics the leaders are watching. In Disney's Q1 2023 earnings call, management said, like many of our peers, we will no longer be providing long-term subscriber guidance in order to move beyond an emphasis on short-term quarterly metrics. Instead, our priority is the enduring growth and profitability of our streaming business. Netflix indicated the same in its Q4 shareholder letter, stating, "Revenue is our primary top-line metric, particularly as we develop additional revenue streams where membership is just one component of our growth." In the past, during the development state of streaming, services focused on building their direct-to-consumer services with subscription at the core. Now it's about revenue and profitability, and advertising is the key to making the money work. Instead of subscriber numbers, Netflix is shifting to a focus on average revenue per membership, or ARM. In its recent earnings call, Netflix shared that they were seeing better engagement on their ad tier than they expected, and did not see much switching away from standard or premium plans to their ad-based tier. That sort of cannibalization was certainly a big fear before the new ad-based tier was launched. Netflix also shared that the ad-based tier generates more revenue than its standard plan. Ad-based tiers and services are key to this next phase of streaming and profitability. Our data on OTT spending shows that despite continued service stacking, average monthly spending on OTT services has dropped since the peak of the pandemic, when spending on streaming was at an all-time high. Consumers are still churning in and out of services at high rates. So advertising becomes a must as services seek more stability and profitability. At the same time, as service spend has been dropping, consumer engagement with ad-based services is on the rise. Ad-based streaming services are now the fastest growing business model in streaming. 31% of US internet households reported watching an ad-supported AVOD or FAST service in the past month. This is up from just 18% in 2018. We also saw an even greater jump from 11 to 24% for freemium services, where a free ad-supported tier is combined with the option of an ad-free paid premium tiers. These are also sometimes referred to as SAVOD or subscription ad-supported video on-demand services. Consumers are evaluating their spending in all areas with the current uncertain economic climate. Ad-based services offer familiarity, cost savings, and often a leaned-back, linear experience. This is a view from our OTT tracker that I mentioned earlier. Market leaders Pluto and Tubi each count over 50 million monthly active users in the US, and we estimate the Roku channel to have more than 38 million monthly active users. These are just 10 of the more than 140 services active in the US with some level of integrated advertising. While the rise of ad-supported streaming feels new, it is worth highlighting just how fundamental advertising is to the media services historically. Across all video service offerings, including broadcast, traditional pay TV, streaming TV, and direct-to-consumer streaming service options, most have traditionally incorporated some form of advertising. The gold boxes highlight models with advertising and show how long-lived and pervasive advertising models are to the success of this ecosystem. There's a lot of money being lost as we continue to shift into the digital marketplace with video services, and the SVOD space is showing signs of market saturation. So now the SVOD leaders are leaning more into ad-based services as well to generate that additional revenue. Finally, there's a really strong relationship between advertising revenue potential and live content, which earns the highest ad spend of all content types. Streaming services have made big moves in the last few years to incorporate live content into their libraries. Paramount Plus offered March Madness, Apple TV hosted Friday Night Baseball and Major League Soccer, and Peacock has WWE. This makes it clear that streaming providers see live content as essential for subscriber growth, engagement, retention, and revenue. In recent years, there's been a greater transition to digital distribution for sports broadcasting, and the number of individual OTT sports services has rapidly expanded. Parks Associates now tracks and monitors over 50 sports streaming providers. ESPN Plus, the most popular sports OTT service, is owned by Disney and is included in the Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus bundle, which offers considerable adoption and visibility benefits over competing sports streaming services. Additionally, ESPN Plus's programming rights include exclusive UFC events, hundreds of MLB and NHL games, and college sports, giving the service a competitive advantage. And many consumers are already in the habit of watching live stream content. 43% of consumers in the US internet households have watched a live event online in the past 3 months. And notably, live streaming households spend considerably more each month on OTT services than households who do not. Non-live streaming households only spend about a third of what live streaming households do. Finding more types of content to engage current non-live streaming households is key to growing revenues. Live streaming households also subscribe more to popular OTT services than non-live streamers do. This gap is narrower for Netflix and Amazon subscribers, but especially wide for Apple TV Plus subscribers. Apple is paying attention. It has been particularly aggressive in seeking out sports rights, with a major deal with Major League Soccer to offer fans a service to watch every game without local blackouts or restrictions. And they've even extended their partnership with the MLB to offer Friday Night Baseball on streaming. So to wrap up, I just want to re-emphasize that we are in the next stage of streaming. We are out of the development phase, and services are looking to leverage new opportunities, especially with advertising, to build profitable, sustainable businesses. Ad-based video streaming services are among the fastest growing segments of the video entertainment market and open new methods of advertising to reach more consumers, generate more revenue, and advance the market further. Thank you so much, and please give us a few moments as we transition to our next panel on evolving ad strategies.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate that wonderful setup and sharing all of that research, showing really just how critical advertising is today in this big shift, again, from sort of that early stage of streaming where we're building subscriber bases, all focus on SVOD, and really a lot of experimentation happening now and looking to advertising to reach profitability. I'm Jennifer Kent. I'm Vice President of Research at Parks Associates, and so pleased to be moderating our panel discussion today. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists joining us from Whirl, Aceto, Iris TV, Origin, and I'm going to ask each of them to come on in and introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their organizations before we dive into the conversation. But also just a reminder that we are able to take questions from the audience. So there is a Q&A tab and a chat tab in the viewing platform. You can put any questions that you have for our panels in either of those tabs, and our team will see it. So with that, I'd love to invite Dave Bernath, who's the Vice President of Sales and Partnerships in Americas for Whirl, to come on in. How are you doing today, Dave?
I'm good. Nice to see you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about Whirl and about yourself there.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Sales and Partnerships at Whirl. We are an integrated platform that really supports content publishers and streamers across really three core areas: advertising, performance marketing, and distribution. We're really focused on helping these distributors maximize their revenues, attract and retain viewers. We heard about in the presentation churn and issues of content discovery to grow their brand value. I actually come from cable TV, so I'm a longtime cable TV guy, places like Comedy Central. So it's interesting to be a part of this next evolution of ad-supported television. And yeah, this slide just kind of sums it up. It's this flywheel of helping people monetize their inventory, increasingly market through some innovative things that we've done at Whirl that grows your distribution, that grows your monetization, and so on and so forth. So that's the Whirl story, and that's me.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for being here, Dave, and for sharing your experience all the way from cable TV into today with us today. So thanks for being here. We also have Mugresh Desai, who's the VP of North America for Aceto. Mugresh, thanks so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about Aceto and your role there.
Thanks for hosting this, Jennifer. So yeah, I'm Mugresh. I'm VP of North America for Aceto, based in Seattle. Aceto, over the last several years, has really been focused on delivering, compelling, engaging, end-to-end video experiences for TV networks, media, sports brands, fitness OTT providers, really anyone who's tried to make forays into delivering OTT experiences. So, really our focus is on making sure that the user experience that's delivered, irrespective of the device platform, is compelling, is performant, and is able to really surface both video and non-video use cases that can keep the end user engaged and from sort of avoiding churn as well. So that's a little bit about us, and really looking forward to the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mugresh. Next, we have Field Garthwaite, who's the co-founder and CEO of Iris TV. Hi, Field. Welcome back.
Hi, Jennifer. Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. Tell us about Iris TV and your role there.
Absolutely. Yeah, excited to be here on this panel. So Iris TV makes video data accessible to buyers, sellers, and all of their ad tech partners in order to create better viewing experiences and drive better advertising outcomes. Our core technology, the Iris ID, is a unique identifier that really technologically is replacing a lot of the functionality that web page URLs have kind of been a core technology to enable all contextual, brand suitability, ad measurement, and verification solutions. And in streaming, there has not been a unique content ID that's been widely accepted in the ecosystem. So the Iris ID is a unique identifier for every streaming video across AVOD, FAST, live, any endpoint that allows kind of all of the major data partners who work in contextual, brand suitability, even post-campaign measurement to have access to video level data in order to run their computer vision and AI on those videos, create their standardized segments, and then they store all of that data on the Iris ID. So it's like a giant container. And then anytime a viewer clicks play on a video, regardless of the device, that data is then available for planning, targeting, and measuring outcomes.
Much a key need in the industry, for sure. So thank you so much for telling us about Iris TV and for being here today, Field. And next up, we also have Stephen Strong, who's the co-founder and chief business officer with Origin. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for being here, and tell us about Origin.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer. Excited to be here. So Origin is a creative technology company. We're focused on reimagining advertising in the connected TV world. And when it comes down to it, we live in a distracted world, which makes it really challenging for advertisers to break through that noise. So we have a suite of products, and everything we do is focused on driving attention. A user, consumer can't buy a product if they're not paying attention. They can't drive outcomes for an advertiser. So everything we do is around getting eyeballs back to the screen on connected TV and really driving significantly increased performance for advertisers.
Fantastic. We'll certainly be talking about a lot of that today. So let me welcome you all in together so we can start off our conversation here. And I really want to start with, and I'm going to start with Field and Mugresh here. A lot of what Sarah talked about to set up this panel today was about this shift in the big picture, right, in the video services ecosystem, where this first kind of generation of streaming was really all about let's spend all the money on the great original content and build our subscriber bases, and now there's this shift towards profitability and advertising really being a key piece and traditional component of monetizing video. So Field, I'd love to start with you and then go over to Mugresh about how you're seeing advertising really fitting into new streaming business models today.
Perfect. Yeah, and I know I promised I'd share some data, so I pulled some for us. But I think even having Dave on this panel, right? Like we all know Comedy Central, right? One of the biggest like profitable businesses in cable. The fact that he works at Whirl, right? Kind of representative of like a big shift happening in the market. It's just an incredible business that he's at now. But kind of the data that Sarah Lee was sharing, kind of obviously Parks and Associates has some of the best data on these trends in the market, but we can corroborate a few of them just from our own research and then things that we've developed for white papers. Over 200 million households now are watching content on CTV. It's 98% of households now that have like some form of connected TV device. And with the trends that are happening with FAST and streaming, kind of subscription with ad capabilities, it's predicted that within 2 years, that market will be bigger than broadcast and cable combined. And that's research that TV Rev recently put out. And kind of with that, the IAB also recently reported that in 2022, 36% of time spent watching, the big screen was on CTV across all households, but only 18% of ad dollars are in that market. And the kind of closest corollary to that is really mobile. About a decade ago, there was this kind of disjointedness between time spent on mobile and ad dollars in mobile. And that's kind of exactly where we are right now in streaming TV. But with any kind of fast growing market, there emerged like kind of new challenges. Gum recently put out research kind of showing, for example, that it was like casino ads, liquor ads, other things that you don't want to be shown in actual cartoons. That was the content that those ads were found in. And this happens in any new market, right? And it's kind of anytime that there's kind of a new market that's moving really quickly, there's a lot of ad dollars coming in. There's sometimes a lack of transparency or a lack of data. This is kind of a state of kind of the current CTV market. And one of the things that's holding back those ad dollars from really, really big, kind of advertisers, which is really going to fuel the growth of this ecosystem, is kind of assurances that they're going to have kind of, a safe environment. It's going to be aligned with their brand values. They're going to be able to kind of filter out. Often it's like the smallest percentage of inventory that's not aligned with their values, but they want to have those assurances so that they can make streaming a real priority of their budgets. And just kind of across the board for kind of these trends at a macro level, it's so important to have a good advertising experience for consumers, because as we all know, there's many new options for where we can get and access content on these devices, on the different apps, on an Amazon or Roku or our smart TV. And so there's a lot of competition for the same eyeballs, and ad experiences are going to be critical to kind of retaining those audiences. And kind of Sarah Lee mentioned this as well, that average revenue per membership, that's going to be a real critical kind of component that now the advertising experience is going to tie into, which is obviously new for Netflix and a lot of these players.
Yeah, thanks so much for starting us off there. I mean, you touched on ad transparency and brand safety, rise of mobile, user experience, all sorts of things that everybody in the industry is dealing with right now. Mrugesh, what are you seeing from Exita's point of view?
Getting off mute there. So from Exito's perspective, we really sort of focus on that user experience layer. And I think one observation I'd like to make is, the sort of industry had very distinct sort of monetization models several years ago. And even if you wanted to sort of move into hybrid monetization from a technological perspective and also user experience perspective, that wasn't really sort of solved for. With the sort of growing movement towards profitability and looking at things like metrics such as ARM, on the technology side and the sort of design thinking side, to actually create a compelling experience around both maintaining paid tiers and ad tiers, and then also giving the content providers of the OTT services the ability to actually create pricing experiments, A/B testing, multivariate testing on the different pricing models. That's also all evolved in the last couple of years. So it's sort of at a great inflection point where everyone is sort of having this push towards these new commercial models, but it's also from a technology perspective being enabled in a very, very good way. And as we've sort of got this data over the last 10 years on how to sort of make ad experiences more compelling, less intrusive, when you sort of disrupt the content viewing. There's a better opportunity, a better chance for these content providers to actually succeed when they implement hybrid models.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that user experience, and Field talked about this too, right? We've talked about churn so much in the past few years, really related to SVOD and people coming in and out and paying, subscriptions, especially because, the break and having to have a contract from the older, traditional pay TV model so people can jump around. Well, engagement and decreasing churn on the ad side is just as important, right? You want to be able to show you how you're keeping those monthly active users coming back, and you're not creating an experience for them that, is pushing them away. So Mrugesh touched on that. Let's go to Stephen for there. I know that you're working on some of, specifically on some of those user experience kind of experiences, right? That are maybe new and really thinking about that as a new way of thinking about churn for ad-based services.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting if you look at the landscape over the last few years. A lot of the free streaming platforms, they kind of place revenue on top of everything. It was really cheap for them to advertise on the platforms and increase their monthly active users at the risk of churn, and the economics made sense. Now that we're in this environment where platforms like Roku and Amazon have their own offerings and are competing with eyeballs, the economics have changed, right? So a lot of these free streaming platforms are forced to kind of reduce their ad loads to be competitive and really prioritize the user experience, which was forgotten about, which again has the added benefit of reducing churn. And where we come in is we work with advertisers and agencies and really understand what is the goal in terms of reaching users, in terms of frequency, in terms of audience. Because again, you still see this now in 2023. I watch a lot of connected TV. I see the same ads over and over again. So it speaks to an inherent issue around frequency, but you can also solve that through creative versioning, right? Localization of content. How do you take this ad that you spent $1 million on, add ancillary content that makes it different, right? So if I see the same ad 3, 4, 5 times, at some point the data shows that you tune out, but when you add this layer of customization, personalization around weather or other criteria, you can make the experience interesting for the user. And I think that's kind of lost when we push that conversation with agencies and brands, because I think there's still a mentality, I'm going to create one version of an ad, I'm going to run it sort of 100 times, and the data shows that there's kind of better things you can do to keep people engaged.
Yeah. So how are you seeing advertisers come around to this idea of contextual advertising and, being able to run different forms of a variety of ads to a particular household or a group of households? Just still experimentation phase, or picking up steam?
I think there's experimentation. We've done some work with Iris around taking their contextual data, and then when we kind of layer on the origin product and we kind of supercharge the inventory, we see really high results in terms of driving additional kind of performance. I think our challenge is still in the space. There's a lot of education. We talk to a lot of buyers who are traditional linear TV buyers, and they get hung up on viewability and things that don't necessarily translate to CTV. So I think we come across teams that are absolutely interested in innovating and doing really unique things. And then there's a lot of folks that kind of want to stick with the status quo. So when we talk to people and have those initial conversations, it's really understanding their ability and interest for sort of breaking the status quo.
Yeah. Dave, I'd love to come to you to get your perspective on, particularly as we shift, advertising spend, and Field talked about this a little bit about where kind of advertising spend has gone, shifting from linear TV to CTV. He mentioned your own, movement from Comedy Central to where you are today. How does the need for streaming providers to generate more revenue and profit square with where ad spending is going today?
It's interesting. I take comfort in all these great charts that show this massive shift in the next couple of years. And then, you turn on the TV and you see ad slates. So I just came from the stream TV show a couple of days ago, and Colin Petrie-Norris from Zumo and Gavin Bridge were having a conversation, and Gavin threw out the idea of having dynamically shrinking ad pods if there was no fill. And then when it was my panel, I said, wrong question. The question is, why aren't there any ads? So, I think a lot of these issues around repetitive ads, other concerns would also be slightly ameliorated if there was more advertising. So you don't have ad slates, on traditional TV. So I'm just looking forward to and hoping that we can get more advertisers and more money really moving into the market. Again, I know the long-term trend is awesome and we're all feeling good about where it's going. But I'm still seeing a lot of empty time on the air.
Well, and Field talked a little bit about, one of the reasons for that is the confidence among advertisers, right, in the ecosystem, and this concern about where their ad is going to be playing next to, what sort of content. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that? Is it, what's holding back that ad spend? Is it overall confidence in the ecosystem, measurement concerns? What do you see as?
Yeah, I'm a more of a programming audience guy by background, but I think, these systems, the way money's spent, the way things are allocated, have incredible inertia, and people want to do things the same way. And even when I was at Comedy Central, 5, 6, 8 years ago, it was 2 different buying groups within agencies. It was hard. So there's just a lot of things structurally on top of the issues that you mentioned that are probably continue to be an issue. But again, I'm not really an expert on it. I'm more of like an audience member watching it unfold. And but I think that has a lot to do with it.
In fact, if you're attending live right now, we do have a polling question. We have 2 polling questions that you can weigh in on. And one of the questions is related to what do you think is limiting ad spend? So we'll let people put in their polling answers here, the biggest challenges for video advertising today. So while people are putting in their answers to our polling question, maybe I can open that up more broadly, going back over to Stephen. So talking a little bit about what's limiting ad spend, but maybe there are some stronger pain points as well, that advertisers have from the advertising point of view, or kind of talking from the streaming point of view a minute ago. But from the advertiser's point of view, is it the measurement? Is it the brand trust? Is it inventory limitations? Too much, right? What do you see as some of the biggest challenges in video advertising today?
I'm going to go with all of the above.
Right.
I think something that Field had mentioned, which I'll echo, is absolutely measurement, right? I mean, if you look at sort of the availability of high quality inventory on connected TV and the shift of money, it's been slow. I think also there's a bit of a come to Jesus of measurement on the traditional broadcast and cable side, where Nielsen was king for many years. I think in this upfront cycle and last, there's a lot of companies like VideoAmp and others who are proposing alternate currencies that more mirror a digital world. So I think that will help and get people comfortable. I think besides that, I think there are lingering sort of content concerns because again, you have really premium traditional type inventory on connected TV, you have UGC and other inventory, and I think there's sort of this divide and hesitation with a lot of big platforms on connected TV to share show level information. And I think traditional linear buyers are interested. I mean, they're used to buying on a show level. So when you talk to them, hey, I can't give you a specific show, but it's going to be an entertainment content. Sometimes it doesn't get them comfortable enough. So I think there's the measurement. I think there's sort of the content and sort of where you're running and the brand safety element. And when we're talking to folks, those are the 2 big things that come up pretty often.
Yep. Looking at our polling results here, the number 1 thing that came back actually is distracted viewing and shorter attention spans. This is broadly in video advertising challenges today, and the second being measurement fragmentation. So Phil, I'll come back to you on measurement fragmentation in a second. But Stephen and then Magresh, maybe if you guys want to comment on that distracted viewing, the shorter attention spans, spending maybe going to some of the actual short form, real short form video formats, but also just we're all on our phones sort of watching TV. Are we paying attention to ads or not? What do you see as good solutions there, Stephen and then Magresh?
I'm just smiling because that's what we do. We play into sort of distraction and try to attention. So thank you for voting that way. But I mean, there's been a number of studies that I think, 62% of people in front of a television have a phone in their screen, right? And then there was a bunch of research earlier this year from sort of iSpot and Group M that because of dongles and old legacy settings, there's a lot of devices running on in the background, and those ads aren't even seen because the TV screen isn't on. So we live in a super distracted world. And how do you do something that drives people? Use ad breaks to get away from TV, right? To go to the bathroom, to get a snack, to do something else. How are you doing something compelling that keeps them on the screen? Or something we're testing and a lot of folks are experimenting with after the Super Bowl thing 2 years ago, where every connected TV ad had a QR code for a while. How do you drive, if you're really doing great targeting and an ad resonates to a user, how do you take them into a mobile experience and get them deeper? So we absolutely live in a distracted world, and something we really focus on is making sure we're driving the right ads to the right users and driving really interesting experiences that keep them engaged and for them not to view advertising as a sort of reason to leave the room.
Yep. Mukesh, over to you on your thoughts on some of the biggest challenges in advertising, especially maybe around that user experience piece.
Yeah, I mean, when we think of distracted viewing, I'd almost sort of bucketize it from a UX perspective between sort of lean back experience and lean in experience, right? When you sort of have that lean back experience, watching your favorite OTT service on the big screen, the ability to sort of render a home screen that is not too busy, that goes right into a piece of content that you were last watching, where content discovery is not cumbersome. All those things matter, in addition to what content is appearing on screen and what ads are rendering. So there's sort of a complementary part that the user experience plays, both for lean back and lean in, to make sure that the user is sort of engaged and not sort of distracted from their core mission, which is obviously to find and consume content as fast as possible that they would enjoy. So, when we sort of think about distracted viewing, it's a multivariable problem, right? I mean, there's multiple services you could be watching on the given service, multiple types of content. How do you find that content? And then ultimately, when it actually comes to the ad experience, for example, how sort of intrusive do you make that, right? Do you sort of subtly transition into it and transition out of it? And from a user perspective, the more you can sort of think about these nuances, the less distracted they're going to be. And when an ad is rendered, for them, it will be less intrusive, which is important.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think, Stephen, you wanted to jump in here too?
I just wanted to add something, and it's less about distraction, but I wanted to echo something he said just around content discovery. I think that is a massive issue on connected TV. When me and my wife sit down at night after the kids are sleeping, we spend 15, 20 minutes going through all the apps and trying to find stuff. And I think there's some companies trying to solve for that, but I think that's just an overarching challenge in the space.
And just to sort of add to Stephen's point about content discovery, Netflix have put out this research, and more OTT services are emulating. But even something as simple as the choice of the content thumbnail can influence click-through behavior, and that's you that much closer to rendering an ad to that user. So, for example, group level sort of content thumbnails versus an individual actor or actress thumbnail can actually influence positively or negatively the click-through behavior. And then when you sort of build in the content recommendation aspect and you understand the user specifically, who or what group you actually render into that content thumbnail can drive that click-through.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think, Dave, I think you had mentioned in our prep call, wanting to talk a little bit about audience discovery and like how do you find and advertise to the audience, that you are looking to connect with, and then align that with, the right ad, the right metadata, the right cover, the right image. What are you thinking about that, Carl?
I mean, this issue of content discovery was on everyone's lips at the Stream TV show. It's actually aptly the name of a product we just launched last month. We've been focused on this a lot recently at World, because this issue of how to get the publishers to find the audiences they want. What he talked about, I saw an OEM exec say that they were looking at 15 to 17 minutes of choice time that they noticed across our platform. So this issue of how to find what you want to watch, and or if you're a publisher, how to find the audience that will like your content, is a massive challenge for the industry. And we've developed a machine learning technology that can enable publishers and streamers to go after these groups and then measure those results And so we're super excited about it. And, it's a big issue in the space. It's ironic that the sort of the way that this streaming growth has broken down the old model, and we're all talking advertising, and created this incredible wealth of content, this amazing array, has created this issue that we're talking about, which is finding content. But at least because now it's CTV, the promise of tools and techniques and technologies that could maybe bring new solutions, I think, is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Who was it? Because we weren't all on screen. Who gave the big audible wow? Because I was feeling that internally, but I didn't, I didn't say that out loud, right?
It was just like 15 minutes. Wow, that's a lot of time, dude.
I know. You could have watched a whole mini short something in that 15 minutes.
In my household, it could be longer than that, and then we just bail because we can't agree. So.
Absolutely, 100%. I was talking with somebody actually recently who specializes in putting together video solutions in the hospitality space, and we did a little bit of research and focusing on what people watch when you get into the hotel room. And I personally, I won't connect anything in a hotel room. I just sit and I watch old school TV because I don't want to have to spend the time, and I'll just watch whatever's on. Otherwise, I'll just sit there and scroll and figure out how to put it all on. So in a lot of ways, we're still lazy a little bit and looking for people to serve it up for us and do it even better. Now, I did want to come back to you, Field, not only because the second biggest challenge in advertising was mentioned measurement fragmentation, of course, but we also had a question from the audience kind of that I think you can weigh in on here. Is there a way to see if viewers actually see your ad? I've read that sometimes CTV ads are playing even when the TV is off. Similarly, with fast channels where a lot of viewers have something on in the background and they aren't actually watching, which we talked about that a little bit, right? Second screen distraction. How can we tell if ads are actually reaching viewers? That's one piece of it, but I'd also love to, hear your thoughts on how all of that, works into, again, giving advertisers the confidence. Are they getting the data and the reporting they need to know what's being played and what's being played around them?
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot there. I think on that kind of discovery kind of problem, just calling out that's why we're seeing fast grow so fast, so quickly. I don't think anyone would have predicted that Pluto and Tubi would be, larger than Roku a few years ago. And that's because of that laid back experience. And one of the most exciting things going on tied to kind of content discovery is that when we do sit down and find the show that we want to watch, the big screen streaming, it does have the highest completion rate, extremely high levels of attention. And Stephen mentioned this earlier, but the team at Origin has been doing research with TVision. It's a great company. TVision has its own panel where they actually have biometrics. People have opted in to have this device, and actually is no, skeletally, if you're kind of looking down at your phone, right, or you actually get up and leave the room. And then they have that panel, and it's a subset, obviously, of the audience, but it's very helpful for understanding that question of if people are paying attention or not. And the difference, kind of if you do have to hit frequency, and, I know Dave, and AppLovin, kind of they know so much more about performance than I do, but often reaching a consumer a certain number of times over a certain period of time is essential to that. But over time, you get to that point that Stephen was mentioning where the consumer no longer cares. And so being able to place that ad in a relevant moment, which is what Origin's unit does, or kind of leveraging data to kind of place it to a consumer when they're in the right mindset. They've actually sit down, they're watching comedy, they're in the mindset for that, and then kind of seeing an ad for The Blackening, kind of like a new comedy coming out from Lionsgate at that moment, increases the impact. And things like unaided ad recall, things like sales lift. And that's really the most exciting part about the industry right now, is that Jennifer, I'll chat a little bit more about the problem, but just kind of the most exciting part that's kind of emerging with these new data capabilities is that CTV is a lot closer to digital than it is to television. But to Dave's earlier point about the fragmentation inside of major holding companies and agencies and advertisers, those teams have often been separated, and often the TV buyers are the ones that lead streaming. And in streaming compared to TV, you have a environment that's one-to-one. We're all seeing unique experiences regardless of how we access the content. The ad experience is one-to-one. Whereas in television, there's maybe thousands of potential ad slots per month. I mean, it's just in terms of compared to billions. And so this really is kind of an ecosystem where you need to leverage data to drive outcomes. And what's super exciting about it, as more and more data becomes available, you actually have kind of the ability to kind of more granularly target. And we focus on the content level. So never any PII. It's all just based on what the consumer's watching at that moment to place the ad at that moment. It's super exciting because if you think about the search and the mobile side of the ecosystem, or sorry, search and social side of the ecosystem, 8 to 9 million advertisers, $180 billion of ad spend. They're trying to bring that money into CTV because that is a growth market for them, just like gaming. And that's where they're seeing the cost per acquisition pay off. And so that is such a big part of the ecosystem that's kind of coming into streaming. That's super, super exciting. And they're looking for better data because if they kind of can see a certain data point, like a flower vendor, kind of like, 1-800-Flowers targeting viewers watching family content in the weekend, coming up to Mother's Day 1 billion times, that has a big impact on sales. And so that same capability for kind of a performance reason is something that also Fortune 500 marketers are concerned about. And Jounce Media recently found that 70% of the content, in terms of the data that gets through to the buyer in the bid stream to the buying platform, 70% has no content metadata. So there's actually no kind of visibility into where that ad runs. That's a problem for performance. It's a problem for Fortune 500. And kind of solving those issues is really something that we're focused on with all the data partners we enable and store on the Iris ID. But we're very excited about that trend because we just know it's going to unlock a huge amount of investment to all of the content owners we work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think advertisers who are used to spending on digital and social, you frankly have a smarter, view, all the way through, and your ability to target and your ability to put that content where you want it. So great perspectives there. I want to shift a little bit, unless there's other comments on that. I want to shift a little bit into new innovations kind of coming down the pipe. And actually, that was a great thing to point out there, Field, because that makes a nice jump there. Now, Magresh, I understand that you all just recently invested or acquired an extended reality, type company. So I'd love to hear what you're seeing there. And, from this general theme and topic of advertising, right? What's the opportunity you see in the extended reality space? Obviously, Apple jumping in with its headset just a week or so ago.
Yeah, so I think maybe to start that answer, firstly, I think there was this growing consensus maybe 10 years ago in the industry that there would probably be a couple of OEM partners that sort of win the battle for OTT viewership. Completely the opposite has played out, right? Fragmentation has increased, and you have several CTV players. You've got several different platforms to actually view your favorite content. And extended reality is just sort of another set of viewing devices that are going to become more and more commonplace for consuming content on sports and other content mediums. So one of the reasons we made the acquisition of iCandy Lab a few months ago is we're seeing growing experimentation to provide both 2D and 3D content to viewers through these mediums. And I think when it comes to the ad space in particular, it's quite nascent, but I think it provides such an exciting opportunity. So if you think of 6 degrees of freedom and the ability to actually maintain different OTT services in that sort of 6 degrees of freedom, to provide contextual ads associated with where in your VR or AR environment you're sort of consuming content. Contextual ads suddenly becomes even more important and relevant. And when you sort of think about the capabilities for ads to be rendered in a volumetric way, engagement can actually be on a whole different level. So it's a very exciting space to watch, very nascent. And I think it's up to companies like ourselves from a user experience perspective, but also in terms of folks creating ad content to start putting those experiments out there. If you sort of followed the news with the Vision Pro announcement, if you think of a company like Apple, who've got sort of entertainment content, ability to sort of render fitness content, they sort of own the hardware space. It's going to be a fully integrated content and hardware play. And someone who can actually figure out contextual ads that can sort of render between all these different services, I think sort of is going to accelerate their ability to grow in the business.
Yeah, in some ways, when I think about extended reality and what's possible there, I think a little bit how traditional the video space still is, from not even being to the interactive point that kind of mobile and digital advertising is at, right? There's a lot of innovation that has to happen to bridge this gap. And we had a polling question on what new approaches in video advertising are you most excited about, and nobody can agree. Very even spread between extended reality opportunities, hyper-targeting, native ad formats designed directly for CTV, and generative AI. I didn't want to have to be the one to say ChatGPT first, but there I go. Generative AI for creative ad development. Any of those particularly interesting to you all as you look at sort of the next wave of what development in video advertising is going to look like?
I think just from like a creative AI standpoint, like if you think of how advertising has existed on mobile and social, there's a lot of versioning, right? For a single campaign, there could be tens and thousands of individual creative. And I think CTV inherently kind of hasn't allowed that. So when we talk to retailers or folks with individual locations and we can use our technology and incorporate AI, how are we feeding in data to really make granular assets? Because again, the technology allows it, but you don't really see a high level of personalization on connected TVs. We're trying to kind of how do we play into that from a manual standpoint and an automated standpoint that people, where it makes sense at scale, see assets that feel really personalized to them on connected TV, which really is a commonplace now on desktop and mobile and other platforms.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other comments? Okay, we have just a few minutes left. So we did have one more question from the audience that I'd love to take, really about data privacy and security with third-party cookies really becoming a hot topic for online advertising and browsing. What do you see as a move in the TV industry for more protected data collection for CTV?
I can open there. Yeah. So cookies are obviously not used in CTV, right? But it's different types of identity graphs, right? That leverage email, they leverage kind of authenticated users. Household IDs are kind of the data sets that are the backbone of third-party and first-party data, regardless of how it's activated, whether there's a clean room involved or not. And the shift in cookies, though, however, does impact those data graphs, and kind of the other shifts in the ecosystem are resulting in data deprecation. That's making it harder to reach the right audience, right? There's kind of a bunch of different types of TVs, often in different households. You know, I know that Tony from LG is speaking after this, but you know, the kind of different providers in the CTV ecosystem, you know, don't always have the same data, and they're using it to drive great outcomes for advertisers and package it with their media, which is exactly what they should be doing. And so to kind of solve some of these fragmentation issues that have emerged, this is kind of the reason why our publishers asked us to build out the business around the Iris ID in the first place. It came back to the fact that it's really complex to bridge the content side of the ecosystem with the advertising side of the ecosystem. Historically, these systems are very separate. The teams are very separate. And to kind of connect data out of a CMS and get an ID and actually get contextual and suitability data from different providers on it is very challenging. So we've been focused on solving that problem to kind of then unlock consistency, so that the same way that if an identity segment is working for an advertiser, they want to activate that same identity segment on another supply partner. We're beginning to see that when a contextual segment performs well on one publisher, they're expanding and buying that inventory on other publishers, which helps to kind of solve for some of these data deprecation issues, because it's kind of relying on identity alone in this ecosystem is something that is a challenge. If you're even a really big broadcaster or content owner, streamer, device maker, manufacturer that has inventory, you're still going to deal with issues in terms of match audience as clean rooms roll out, as more data deprecation hits the industry. And so instead of kind of that by shifting into walled gardens that might have the biggest data graphs, and we know who those players are, if programmers can help to validate the value of their content, the outcomes that occur when they're leveraging other data sets like contextual, that's an area that we're just excited about all the research and kind of the lean in that's happening from different broadcasters like Univision. Kind of put out some interviews on that this week, and kind of we have a lot of research that we're teeing up in that area. So that's one of the ways that we're working on addressing it. But although cookies aren't in CTV, that does impact the data graphs, and it will impact the industry overall.
Really helpful comments. Thanks for that. Okay, so we just have two minutes left. So I'd love to maybe give Dave and Magresh the opportunity to close us out here. Maybe if you want to give us some final comments on as services are sort of making business decisions, services or advertisers trying to make the business decisions around streaming and ad-based streaming today. What should they really be focused on? What practical advice do you have for them in making, the business of ad-based streaming work today?
I don't know, Magresh, maybe you should take that one. Just engage, lean in, embrace the future.
Yeah, no, I like the question, from a practical standpoint, right? But ultimately, if you sort of putting the business lens on this, it's all about creating the shortest path to consuming the ad, right? Every sort of performance optimization you can make, whether it's from a app load time perspective, content buffering perspective, those things all add up in making this as least disruptive as possible for the user. And ultimately, that is what's going to lead to more user stickiness, and for them to sort of accept, a higher frequency of ads, etc. I mean, that is an element that plays very strong from our perspective when we think of the UX aspect. And then I think the comments made about contextual ad serving is just something we should reinforce over and over in the industry. We solve that, and suddenly the marriage, Field was talking about between content and ad is a lot more seamless and intuitive from the user perspective. They interpret the ads they're seeing as something correlated, and they sort of build a brand allegiance to the OTT provider, who are sort of giving away quote unquote free content at a cost, and that's probably the sort of interpretation many users have today. But as soon as it's served in a contextual way, it's like, look, I'm actually getting ads that make sense to me and matter for me.
Absolutely. Well, that'll have to be the last word then. Thank you all so much for sharing your time and your deep expertise with us today. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Give us just a minute. We are going to invite in our visionary speaker. Here we go. Our visionary spotlight speaker today is Tony Marlowe, who's the Chief Marketing Officer with LG Ads. Tony is so kind to share his expertise with us today. He's through his role, not only that he's developed at LG Ad Solutions, but his previous role as CMO at Integral Ad Science, CMO at Data Axle, Global Head and Vice President of B2B Marketing at Yahoo, and as the co-founder of a mobile app development company, Appy Dragon. So thank you so much, Tony, for being here. How are you?
Hi there, Jennifer. Doing great. How's everything been going today?
Wonderful. Great to hear from our last panelist and our analyst, Sarah Lee, who teed us up with a little bit of research, and excited to hear your point of view on what's happening in ad-based streaming today.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I guess we'll dive in. And what I really wanted to start with, so as was mentioned, Tony Marlowe, I'm with LG Ad Solutions. Now, I know maybe not everyone is familiar with what LG Ad Solutions is. And essentially, we are the connected television advertising wing of LG. They have a majority stake in our company. And that's who we are. But rather than hear me go through a protracted explanation, we prepared a short video for everyone. So if we could just cue that up, and then we'll dive into some of the meat of what I really want to talk about today. But if we could show the video, that would be great. Fantastic. Well, thanks for having me here. And what I really wanted to spend our time today talking about is this concept of the big shift. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by the big shift, but it is based on some thought leadership research. In fact, we've done a few waves of it in the US. We've also done it in markets such as the UK, Canada, even some parts of the Middle East. But really, this shows the consumer habits and the changing consumer viewership patterns. And this is really fundamental for marketers everywhere. But before we dive into the thought leadership research, I did want to just set the stage with some industry available research. I've used eMarketer. There are several sources for this. They all tell essentially the same story. Now, what we're looking at here is rewinding all the way back to 2011 through to the projections for the end of this year. This is share of media time in the US. And I've actually been tracking this for a number of years, and I love it because it's a good barometer for what people are doing, certainly how they're spending their time. And there's a couple of really clear patterns here. So basically, traditional media, TV, radio, print, plus desktop internet have been steadily eroding over the past decade or so, decade or more. That has been true for a while. Now, if we were having this conversation just a few years ago, I might say traditional media is in decline and there is only a single medium that is in growth in the US, and that is mobile. And that has basically been the case up until now. But as you probably guessed, there's a new player in town. And when we're talking about total share of time, CTV is increasingly consuming an increasing percentage of that. Now, the caveat I would say here, just to help with interpretation, the entire media consumption pie can grow. And so that is to say, it's possible for some viewership or listenership to remain relatively stable, even if it is in decline in terms of share of media spent. But the overall trend still rings very true that CTV and mobile are the growth spaces right now, and very clearly much so. And so that brings us to this concept of the big shift. All studies like this need to have a methodology slide. What you need to know is earlier this year, we did an online survey amongst CTV users. The sample was almost 800, which was comparable to the previous survey, and it was all balanced to the US Census. So we are looking at the US version of this data set. Again, we've got other versions. Now, I'll kick off with something that is probably not that mind-blowing, but it's really important to talk about. The study found that 93% of the US population is reachable via connected television. That is, whether it's natively connected, so a smart TV, or whether it's via a plug-in device into the TV to stream the content, it's at a point that's near saturation. And this is a good moment to explain exactly what I mean by the big shift. And actually, there have been two phases to the big shift. The first phase really coincided with the onset of the pandemic. So put yourself back into 2020. We were following stay-at-home guidance. Much of the world was following stay-at-home guidance. We were at home consuming more media, watching more television, starting to stream more television than ever before. And there was maybe a 3-month period where we saw 3+ years of behavioral change as pertains to how people watch television. So that was phase one of the big shift. And another way of saying that is this was the moment in time where it was adoption. Now, phase one of the big shift was really characterized by subscription television. So I think of the original version of Netflix. You pay your fee, you monthly or annual, you get your content, there's no advertising. That's what was happening in 2020. And that's what primarily the streaming experience was for the vast majority of streamers at that point in time. Right now, we are experiencing a fundamental second phase of this shift. And that is the shift from these subscription services into ad-supported models of connected television. Now, we all know the adage, the ad dollars follow the eyeballs. The eyeballs are really starting to drift towards these ad-supported versions. And a lot of this big shift study is going to show some of the behaviors that really underpin this. And so when we talk about the big shift, that's what I mean. Phase one, adoption. Phase two, shifting into ad-supported models. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Okay, so when we're talking about ad-supported television, and there's a few flavors, but I won't get into the complexities. Not at least not too much. So, I'm really talking about any format where the ad is available, where the content is available for free, and there are ads there. What we found in this study was that 8 in 10 are currently using these ad-supported models of CTV. That didn't surprise me, but what did surprise me was this next stat on the right-hand side of your screen. Almost 2/3, 63% said they actually prefer ad-supported models of connected television. Now that's just wild. Throw yourself back, as I said, to 2020, and we did not run this study at that point in time. But if you would have asked that same question there, I dare say that number would be significantly lower. And again, there's a number of reasons for that. We're seeing economic concerns at the household level. We're seeing the number of subscriptions that are available completely ballooning, and people are starting to engage in behaviors where it's essentially saying, I want more content, but I don't want to have to pay for it. And so this ad-supported CTV is widely being embraced. Also, when we look at free ad-supported CTV, so sometimes that's called fast free ad-supported streaming television, we're seeing that half are watching in excess of 2 hours per week. And actually 10% are watching in excess of 10 hours. This is just the free version. This isn't including all of the other connected television that's being streamed. So this is starting to not pick up in just terms of numbers, but also in terms of volume of actual viewing time. Ad-supported CTV is starting to become a bigger and bigger player. Now, it's hard to talk about this if we don't talk about this in-between model. I mentioned subscriptions, I mentioned free ad-supported streaming television, but there is this new in-between model, or maybe not so new in-between model, but we've seen some of the players you see on screen here, Netflix, Disney, Hulu's been doing it for a while, Peacock, introduce these subscription services that come at a lower price because they're subsidized by ads. Popularity of these has been wild. If you tuned into the latest Netflix earnings call, a user on their ad-supported version of their service is actually more profitable for them than a subscriber, which is pretty wild. So when we look at where is it going, both the consumer behavior, but also some of the business fundamentals, such as I just mentioned with the Netflix earnings call, they're all pointing towards everyone rushing into this space. It is really important if you're looking to connect with your audience, because this is where audiences are. Okay, now we're talking about the importance, but some of these preferences are shifting. And so and we look at this in a couple of ways. First, I want to take a look at the 12-month retrospective. So at the point of the survey, we asked people, look, what are some of the behaviors you've been exhibiting as pertains to television over the past year? 29% cited that they had removed a subscription CTV service from the household. So over the last year, almost 30% have removed a service, while over 1/3, 35%, had added free ad-supported streaming in the past 12 months. Now, what's really fascinating by this, and if you look into some of the qualitative that I'm not really going to dive into, certainly not on a slide level today, they're essentially saying, look, I don't want to pay for more of this content, but I do want the content. So I'm going to start doing a few things. I'm going to adopt free, but I'm also going to start doing things like what we call subscription cycling. And I'll talk about subscription cycling in a moment. But the point here is they're readily embracing a different way to watch television. Now, when we talk about subscription cycling, what feeds into it is a really high percentage, almost half, have actually canceled the streaming service specifically because of economic concerns. So where at the household level, people are starting to have been getting a little worried about what potential economic headwinds might be coming. So not only are we wanting to consume more of this content, this feeds into an acceleration of this pattern. So I would expect in the coming 12 months to see a massive accelerator against all of this. And then we asked them about a range of things. So, streaming sort of actually topped it, but also cable bills have been canceled due to economic concerns. And for some people, even a mobile phone bill. And I presume that's more of a switching of providers rather than a full-on cancellation there. But we're seeing these economic concerns really weigh in. So this brings us back to the point of subscription cycling. So let me explain what I mean by that. Essentially, what they're saying that they're doing, and this is almost 6 in 10 say this, is they're willing to cancel their subscription after they've watched the content they want. So basically, people are now starting to say, look, I'll have 1, 2, 3 subscriptions active at a given moment in time. I'll binge all of the content I want. I'll then cancel those and move on to the next batch. So we're talking about 6 in 10. And I've been recording a few podcasts lately. It's funny, every single podcast host laughs if I share this stat and they say, yeah, that's totally true in my household. 60% are doing this. And again, like, it's also worth mentioning, if we just sort of step back for a moment, no one's saying that they're dialing these subscriptions down to 0. That's just not the case. That's certainly not what we're observing. What we're saying is they're reducing the vast number that they had previously. So if your household had 7 or more, maybe this year, last year, maybe this year there'll be 6 or 5 or fewer active at a given moment in time. And that's what we're observing. And the gap is being replaced by free services. And I should also mention, at LG Ads, it was sort of in the video, our version of a FAST, a free ad-supported streaming television service, is LG Channels. And the cool thing about that is it gives you these 300 plus channels. It's essentially a cable-like experience. It's not only completely free, but as soon as you plug your TV into the wall and to the Wi-Fi connection, it just works. You don't need to marry it to your subscriptions. You don't need a cable box. And so there's a behavioral element to it too, where it's just so easy to access quality content, certainly on an LG TV. So subscription cycling, this is one of the major things. Now, I mentioned we had the retrospective look in terms of what people have been doing with subscription and ad supported. We also asked, what is your intent in the coming 12 months? So this gives us some forward-looking read. And what we found was on the subscription side of things, 32% intend to remove another subscription service over the next 12 months. And at a slightly lower clip, so the 24%, they're going to add some of this free consumption here. So basically, this is saying what we have observed over the past year is likely to continue over the next 12 months. And that's a really huge thing. Again, remembering, and this is a good moment to just sort of say it out loud and say it overtly, for marketers, certainly if you put product placement within content, if you put that to one side, for marketers, in the subscription version of TV, there's not really an opportunity, certainly on the full subscription version, for you to connect with audiences. Like, it just doesn't exist. And so marketers start to become really interested once you're starting to see such a critical mass of people consuming connected television. And this is what we've observed, and we're saying it's going to keep going. Usage of services like LG Channels and some of the other players that are out there is going to continue to increase. And so this is why marketers are looking here. And I've been out there sort of talking about this a little bit. That one of the things I love about connected television, especially for a marketer, is it's the sight, sound, motion that we've always loved about television advertising. Certainly as marketers, we've always loved it, while having the addressability and the targetability more akin to what we were used to in digital environments. And it's really the best of both worlds. Now, I would also say, is the ecosystem currently perfect? Absolutely not. I think there are some issues worth discussing. There are things like frequency cap issues, which you can control for, but maybe in an imperfect way. There are all sorts of things that I think we're well on the path to providing an even better service for, but being on that journey is a really important acknowledgement. And that is why so many of the world's best marketers are starting to really heavily invest into connected television. We asked some questions about content consumption types, and this is really just in here for comparison. So the darker purple is TV, the lighter purple is mobile, and this was just one example of a broader array of sort of topics and genres we asked. But it's unsurprising. It's movies, TV shows, sports is what they prefer on the TV. Remembering you can consume these things on your mobile, on your tablet, on other devices, but the vast majority of people prefer to consume this stuff on the biggest screen in the home. The exception is social video, where mobile is the clear winner there. I didn't include it, but I was pretty interested with social video. If it was a household with children under the age of 18 in it, social video for TV was actually significantly higher. I think it was in the mid to high 30% range, if I'm remembering correctly. And so that's also interesting for understanding, okay, where is it going over the next few years? And, I have two young boys. I certainly know that some of that kids streamable content, social content, is viewed on the household TV quite a lot. And I think that's a driving force. So these households with children are a little bit different around the social videos. But this slide I view as just really confirming what most of us probably already thought. Oh, I love this. So one of the things we asked folks to sort of talk about is, okay, between turning your TV on and actually landing on some content that you're watching, we found that it takes people 5.7 minutes. That's 5 minutes, 42 seconds between turning it on and actually landing on some content to watch. Again, this is kind of funny, but certainly in my household, I can relate to this. And what's interesting is I talked about CTV as a medium for marketers. It is not just these video, these 15, these 30-second commercials. Sure, that is a big part of what we can monetize in terms of content, of the ad units, the ad media that we sell. But we have other canvases, such as the native canvas that's native to the user interface. Excuse me. And by the way, Hollywood loves it. So if there's a new, if there's a new blockbuster available for stream, or a new TV show, or even a new streaming app available for your television, you can help that discovery process by advertising within the native. And what's also interesting is, because so many people are conditioned to think of native as not necessarily the most quality inventory, certainly from digital environments, that tends to be the perception. Within connected TV environments, native is actually some of the most premium inventory. You've got people that want your help. They want help with discovery. They're having issues with it. They even just want ideas, suggestions. And we're even seeing outside of media and entertainment, players like Uber, for example, on some of their delivery services are also starting to get involved. It's movie night. Let's get some pizza. And so this native canvas and this almost 6 minutes of deciding is downtime where marketers can make a connection with their audience and do so in a powerful, canvas-rich way. So that 5 minutes, 42 seconds, I love that one. Now this is around some of the sources for new content recommendations. So it's word of mouth, but it's also the home screen of your TV, such as your LG TV, or the home screen of a specific app, whether that be Netflix or one of the other players. So that screen is an important player for the recommendation engine, for recommending what you might watch next. All right, and this is something that is a topic that deserves its whole own session. So I'm only going to briefly touch on it. But the notion that marketing needs to be relevant is strong. I believe this for many, many years. I've been involved in different biometric studies that essentially show your brain on ads that are relevant versus not. And consistently, ads that are relevant for an individual outperform ads that are simply not. And so, for example, I'm a Nike fan, but if Nike is advertising women's running shoes for me, I'm just not in market. I'm never going to buy that. If they showed me the men's version, suddenly that's relevant. And that's what we mean by the power of relevance. So you can see some of the data points here. Almost 3/4 prefer seeing ads that are relevant to their interests. Some are saying, I want it to be relevant to the content that I'm watching. Some feel strongly that just there's something about streaming television that makes those ads more relevant. And you see almost 1/3 they're saying they pay more attention. And I think it's that addressability, that targetability that enables that. All right. And before I go into sort of some of the summary findings, I just want to talk a little bit about media multitasking, or co-viewing, if you will. Now, the vast majority, almost everyone, is saying, while I'm watching TV, I multitask with another device, a mobile, a laptop, something else. I'm doing something else while I'm watching television. This isn't specific to streaming. This is all television. The vast majority are doing it. And when they are doing this, it's social, it's games, and it's shopping. And I'll just go back one moment to this 96%. I love this stat because I think whether you're talking about shoppable ads on your TV or whether you're talking about creating a shoppable experience on the mobile, I believe this highlights for marketers the critical importance of having at least a thoughtful, if not consistent, media plan across the biggest screen in the home, plus the one that's in the palm of their hand. Understanding that this is the behavior can help you provide a unified experience and not one that's segregated between the different devices. And so it might be making shopping easier on your mobile via an ad that you see on your TV. You know, right now QR codes are popular, but there are many other ways of doing that as well. But most people are multitasking most of the time, and I believe it was around 30%, just over 30% said they multitask, quote, all the time. It's pervasive and people are doing it. And when they are doing it, shopping is one of the top 3 things that is in their activity suite. Okay, so that was a little bit of a whirlwind. So let's just dive into the key takeaways. And if you take nothing else away, and I believe we're going to have time for Q&A, maybe a quick fireside back and forth, but I would hope you just take away these. So connected television, it's at near saturation. We're observing 93% have access to it, and it's growing. There are a few phenomena I should say, that I did not really go into, things like death of the dongle. People are now less inclined to plug something into their TV, more inclined to use the native features. All of those things are happening, but the core thing is connected TV is at near saturation. We talked about this in a few ways, but ad-supported CTV, the preference is becoming high, whereas previously it probably was not the case. 80% use it, 63% prefer it, and you've got 7 in 10 that are enjoying ad-subsidized models of subscription. So ads are on vogue for connected television right now. The 6-minute stat, so 5 minutes, 42 seconds. This is a real native advertising opportunity. This is a moment for marketers, regardless of their industry, to connect with their audience. This 6 minutes of decision making is kind of, it's right there for the taking in terms of attention. And I would advise marketers to consider this in their media plan. And then lastly, and I know we just talked about it, but multitasking, this co-viewing. It's pervasive. It presents opportunities for marketers and opportunities for us to, both on a content and an advertising level, provide consistent, relevant, immersive experiences. And I didn't mention this earlier, but we offer a service called Household Extend, which extends the media footprint onto other devices within an LG TV household. That's just one example of how you can take advantage of that. And so they're the key advantages. Now, these were just extracts. If you wanted to download the full report, you can use the QR code on screen now. But otherwise, I'd love to spend a couple of minutes taking questions or just having a bit of a chat.
Yeah. Tony, thank you so much for sharing all of that data. As a research company, we love all the data. So thank you for coming with all those metrics today. And I can tell you, a lot of parks data really coincides with almost every trend that you put up there today. One in fact, I wanted to call up that my colleague Sarah presented earlier today was this big shift that you called out with subscriptions, people canceling subscriptions, streaming services, and the rise of ad-based. We've been tracking the spend across subscription streaming services as everybody's streaming stack grew bigger and bigger, and it was getting closer and closer to pay TV spend. And it really peaked during the pandemic, and it's come back down. So in the middle of the pandemic, people were spending up to $90 across their streaming stack, and it's kind of come back down to 73 while ad-based is rising. So really appreciate all of that data that you've been sharing. So I do see some questions coming in. I think one question that I see coming in for you is actually around contextual advertising. So this is something that we did talk about in the panel leading up to yours, is this opportunity to show ads that are a little bit more contextual in nature about either the content that's being shown or something else about the environment. Is there anything from LG's perspective that you'd love to share there on the opportunity for contextual advertising?
Yeah, context, and this sort of goes to the relevance point. We know that context matters a lot for how people react to the content that they're viewing, the ad that they're viewing. The same ad in different environments can perform a little differently. But what I can say, though, is some of the best media planners in the business, they're more focused on viewership trends And so that is to say, like, less I want to hit people within a sporting environment and more I want to hit sports households. And so the way they do that with us, so we have a thing called automatic content recognition, ACR. I'm sure it's come up through the course of the day. And if you're not familiar, I think about it as it's almost like a Shazam technology that's just built into your TV, and we can use it to understand what is the content that's being watched, what is the ad that's being watched. And it's a combination of audio and video, so don't get stuck on the audio part of Shazam. The idea is that there's just a fingerprint, we can identify it. And so we know, are these sports enthusiasts? Are they movie buffs? Are they into the news, et cetera, et cetera? And that can help drive relevant messages to relevant households. And so while context is important, we're seeing the best of the best, and scale is a really important part of it. You might not be able to get all the scale you want for that one specific game, but what you can do is you can hit basketball fans at the household level at a broader level. And so that's how we're seeing that mainly being used. Will it shift into the future? Possibly, but I think it tends to follow where is the scale. And then it could even follow, cost benefit analysis. So for example, maybe your company can't afford a Super Bowl slot, but you can retarget Super Bowl users within the rich environment of CTV using ACR data. So that's another use case there.
Awesome. Thank you for taking that question. We have just about a minute left here. So I also wanted to call out, I know that your team, I saw, released a white paper today around direct-to-glass advertising. So I wanted to call that out for you. So those who are watching today, you can go ahead and find the direct-to-glass white paper in addition to the one Tony was talking about today. But do you want to say anything about sort of that strategy or that term, advertising direct-to-glass and what the advantages are there?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for mentioning that. This has been a work in progress for a little while now, and we view it as just critical for anyone who's considering investing in the space. So what we mean by direct to glass is when you are at the manufacturer level. So for us, we have 150 million LG TVs worldwide. There are 35 million in the US. You are within that environment able to control for things like frequency, control for things like targeting. It starts to solve some of the biggest problems that marketers have with CTV if they're working with a litany of different OTT or app providers. And so going direct to glass gives you total visibility on all of those behaviors. And what I would also say, part of the direct to glass formula is that ACR, and there's a little bit of a misnomer. Some people think that ACR, which is what I was just mentioning as a Shazam-like feature, they believe it's connected television viewership in, if you will, for connected television viewership targeting out. It's only kind of true because it's actually the complete picture in. So it can ingest linear TV viewing habits, sure, connected TV viewing habits, as well as HDMI things like gaming consoles or other plug-in devices. It could take the viewership habits of that with varying granularity, create targetable segments and measurable segments. And so going direct to glass enables things like that where you just simply can't if you're going with a pure play OTT provider. And so that's why we view it as fundamental. I would also say if you work with us and one other OEM in the market, you've got half of the market worldwide. If you start adding 2 or 3 to those, then you've got almost everyone. So the resistance to this sort of strategy is I don't want to have to work with a super large number of players. And the good news is you don't have to. It's a really short list of players that can help you get the best of ad-supported connected TV.
Wonderful. Well, I'd love to take this conversation all day, but unfortunately that will have to be it for our time. Tony, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your data and your findings and your thoughts today. Really appreciate it.
Jennifer, thanks for having me, and I hope the rest of the day is as successful as it's been so far.
Okay. Thanks so much, Tony.
Bye.
Bye. So for just as a reminder for everybody else, so that's it for today's virtual Future of Video. Our next session is in September, and we're talking all about building new revenue opportunities, particularly focused on T-commerce. We see a lot of innovation actually in this space where there's been, this great goal and idea and vision of what T-commerce could look like, and it's been really hard space to make work, but some new players and new technologies are rolling out to have another crack at it. And we see actually a lot of interest. Park Associates just did some research in the t-commerce space that we'll be sharing during that session. Also, our Future of Video event will be back in person in November in the Los Angeles area, Marina del Rey, California. If you're used to coming to Future of Video in person in December, know that we've moved it a little earlier in the year, so it will be in November. And we do have our call for speakers open. So if you're interested in speaking during the September session focused on e-commerce or in person in November at Future of Video, please make sure that you submit to speak because we're looking at those speaker submissions. Also, just wanted to highlight some of the research that is available to you today. So especially focused right on this advertising topic and how important we think it really is today and for the future of a sustainable video ecosystem. We have a report on ad-based OTT growth in FAST and AVOD services, as well as our ongoing video services dashboard research service, which is based on surveys of 8,000 to 10,000 households every quarter. And we deliver that several times a year to follow the key metrics in trending consumer preferences in the video space, as well as our OTT market tracker, which tracks over 400 services in the US and in Canada, and estimates monthly active viewers and subscriber data for a subset of those 400 services. So Sarah mentioned this before, but oftentimes folks don't realize that their company may already be subscribing. And so if you'd like to know if you already have access to the OTT market tracker and you just need to create a login, you can reach out to us and we'll let you know if your organization already has a subscription and we can make sure we get you access. We also offer custom marketing services like white papers and webinars, and we have a few on this topic as well, so I just wanted to highlight those. These are complimentary to download, so I'm very excited about our white paper that we did with Quick Play, focused on personalized virtual channels, maximizing fast content, a white paper that we produced with Adia on leaning in, engaging videos with interactive video, as well as a white paper that we produced with FPT software on engaging next-gen video viewers, leveraging AI and ML, very, very hot topic this year, as well as our white paper with Symphony AI Media on optimizing video and enhancing content performance for OTT success. And finally, a white paper with Adia on vision-based tech and next-generation control. So all sorts of complementary resources out there to help move the industry discussion forward. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again in September.